Ever wonder if, deep down, the US actually dislikes Europe? Since the Russia-Ukraine war began, Europeans are the ones losing cheap oil and seeing their economies tank. When the US sanctions Chinese goods, Europeans are the ones getting screwed. When the US raises global tariffs, Europeans take the biggest hit. They claim to be friends, but why this treatment? The timing is suspicious, especially with The Atlantic magazine suddenly getting dragged into the conversation this Sunday. It was people who worked in the Trump administration, basically a leaked chat. This time, the drama is too hot to handle. You can support the release of secret info from these leaked chats at this QR code. And in this video, let's dig into it together. So, does America actually not like Europe after all? So here's the deal. A guy named Jeffrey Goldberg, who's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, said that out of nowhere he got pulled into a group chat called Houthi PC Small Group by accident. And in this group, there were a bunch of big shots from the Donald Trump administration, like seriously high-profile people. There was J.D. Vance, the vice president, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, and even Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. Wow, that's intense. And once he got in, he saw messages where they were talking about an airstrike against the Houthi group in Yemen. They were even sharing details about the operation before it actually happened. Now, let me tell you a bit more. First of all, what I'm really curious about is how Jeffrey even got into that group. Was it a real group or a fake one? We still don't know. But let's say it was real, and information could leak out that easily. Doesn't that mean there's a serious national security flaw? And in there were some really explicit messages. There were even messages in the group that clearly insulted Europeans. Goward shared a message from J.D. Vance, who said he didn't want to help Europe anymore. And then Pett added that Europe living off the benefits from others is just pathetic. Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff, said they should find a way to charge Europeans to cover the costs of the attacks. So was I shocked to see this chat? This kind of attitude when talking about Europe didn't really shock me that much, because J.D. Vance, to be honest, he already talks like this about Europe in public anyway. For example, at the conference in Munich, he said it, and President Donald Trump himself has also said that the EU was established to take advantage of the United States. And before this, J.D. Vance gave an interview about how the U.S. really wants to get Greenland, right? During the interview, he even said that. Denmark isn't a good ally. And as for Trump's Middle East envoy, like Steve Biegun, he called Europe ineffective. He even suggested that, actually, the US could just replace the European Union with the Arab monarchies. Like, can you even do that? So let's take a look at what's going on here. Why do Trump and his people dislike Europe so much? It's not complicated. Trump runs his administration like a business, so it's all about the numbers. The EU has a trade surplus with the US of 157 billion euros. That's just too much. Since 2000, Europe has consistently had a big surplus with the US year after year. They run a surplus with America while running a deficit with China, meaning they buy from China instead of the US. That's why Trump is upset. But is it wrong for Americans to want German cars? Trump sees the EU as he thinks the EU is taking advantage of America by relying on the purchasing power of American consumers. Like, maybe he thinks Americans just have money to burn or something. He says Europe is exploiting this to drive their own economy, and they don't buy anything back from America in return. And Trump and his crew, they have another idea too, that the European Union is taking advantage of the United States because of America's generosity. So how exactly? Let me explain this idea a bit more. It comes from the issue of NATO funding. America is by far the most generous in NATO, paying the most to protect all the other countries, and has been paying a lot for many years now. And it looks like the US will keep paying a lot like this for a long time to come. Meanwhile, why does Europe pay so little compared to the US? When you compare it, Europe really isn't paying enough. Why doesn't Europe pay to take care of itself? If you look at the graph, If you look at the actual numbers, it's true. Just like America says, the US has been paying more for a very long time, for centuries even. And besides that, the US Navy, which patrols the seas, also plays a key role in guaranteeing Europe's maritime trade and exports. America says this all costs money, you know? Plus, the US doesn't really get much benefit from this either. In fact, the US relies less on maritime trade than Europe does. That means protecting the safety of trade and shipping on the seas that America patrols actually benefits Europe more than it benefits the US. So let's think about it. For all these decades that everyone's been calling the United States the world's police, hey, is America really that generous, being the world's police and looking after the safety of both land and sea for other countries, especially Europe, without getting anything in return? If we look back at the US defense budget that Congress approves, for the country to spend each year, the highest in the world, really, every year the United States spends over $900 billion on the military. Is that money really just for looking after other people? Honestly, the military budget is a sign of being a superpower. And one thing is clear, America can't afford to lose to China. If the US spends less on its military than China does, it can't really call itself the #1 superpower. That's why the United States has to maintain the world's largest military budget to keep its position as the #1 power. The second point is that the fact the United States spends such a massive amount on its military means they have both a huge army and tons of weapons, just so much of everything. That's the bargaining power of the United States. Have you ever wondered why so many countries have to follow US policies so closely? Sure, part of it is because they control the dollar, but another big reason is their military might. Let me give you an example of a country. Why is it that Japan, which has such a huge economy, honestly should be able to make its own decisions, but why does it have to listen to the US so much? Well, if you look at the map, you'll see. Let's focus on Japan. From the very top of the main islands all the way down to the sea and even the tiny little islands, there are US military bases all over Japanese territory, up to 21,000 locations. And if you count the smaller islands below, it totals 24,000 sites. For example, this little island here, Marqueshima, is a small island that serves as an air base for both the US and Japan. Amami-Oshima is a base for long-range missile systems, both naval and army missiles. Then, a bit further down, there's Okinawa, which hosts missile bases as well as cyber warfare facilities. These are used to disrupt things like communications hacking, especially. And then there are these two tiny islands here, Miyako and Ishigaki, which have long-range missile systems specifically aimed at targeting the Chinese Navy. A little further down is Yonaguni Island, the closest to Taiwan, which serves as a cyber warfare base. These are just a few examples, you see. The money the United States spends on military affairs is used for things like this. It's what makes Japan still feel like it needs to rely on America. Otherwise, Japan might get attacked by China or something like that, right? Besides that, the reason the US has to spend so much on its military is also because it builds alliances with countries all over the world. Do you know how? Through the ties of weaponry. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, countries around the world, out of 195 countries, the US has established relationships through military weapons with 103. When buying US weapons, it comes with agreements like, you can do this, but not that. You must buy this from me. It's a relationship based on weapons, like a love affair with missiles. It's all intertwined. Since the Russia-Ukraine war, Europe has had to import even more from the US, up to 105%. Meanwhile, the United States has been able to dominate the global arms market. They've held the #1 market cap for as long as anyone can remember, controlling 40%. The US can make as much as $318.7 billion a year from arms sales. That's also why Europe has to be considerate to the US, like they're willing to not buy cheap oil from Russia. Part of it is that Europe already dislikes Russia on its own, but to the point where they have to completely cut off energy to the point that it would hurt their own economy, it's because they have to be considerate of the United States. America is still the one who, looks after and protects the European zone. That means if the US ever says, hey, we don't like Europe taking advantage of us, so we're going to cut off all support and funding, and one day Europe manages to stand on its own 2 feet, that's the day we'll see the United States lose its bargaining power. Go back, Europe.